The galaxy's greatest combat instructor offered to teach a human. 10 minutes later, she bent his sword in half without breaking a sweat. Look, I need you to understand something right from the start. Krathvor was not just confident. No, he was the kind of confident that walks into a room and expects applause for breathing. The kind of confident that made lesser beings check their reflection to see if they had somehow shrunk. And honestly, up until that fateful day on Meridian Station, he had every reason to be. The Zentari combat instructor stood at an impressive 8 feet tall, with 4 arms that could each bench press a small shuttle, and an exoskeleton that made Durasteel look like wet paper. His purple and black carapace gleamed under the station's artificial lighting, polished to perfection because of course it was. Krathvor had spent the last 15 cycles, that is roughly 23 of your Earth years, defeating every challenger foolish enough to step into his training arena. 7 star systems, 43 species, 0 losses, 0. He wore that record like a crown and made sure everyone knew it. The walls of his training facility on the station's recreation deck were plastered with holographic displays of his victories. Slow-motion replays of him dismantling opponents played on loop. There was even a statue, life-sized, of him in his signature winning pose. Yes, he commissioned it himself. No, he felt no shame about that whatsoever. Meridian Station was one of those fancy diplomatic hubs. You know the type. Gleaming corridors, multiple species coexisting in something resembling harmony, trade agreements being signed over overpriced drinks at the observation lounges. It floated in neutral space, belonging to no one, and everyone simultaneously. The Galactic Council had just approved humanity's application for associate membership status, which meant humans were now trickling onto stations like this one for the first time. Krathvor had heard about humans. Naturally, everyone had. The rumors were hilarious. Apparently they came from a death world with crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, and predators that would give most civilized species nightmares. But looking at them, please, they were tiny, soft, with only 2 arms and no natural armor whatsoever. Their skin looked like it would tear if you breathed on it wrong. Classic case of rumor inflation, he decided. Probably some human propaganda to seem more impressive than they actually were. That morning, Krathvor was making his usual rounds through the station, mostly so people could see him and remember why they should never challenge him. He passed the market district, received the customary nervous nods from the Peltharian merchants, ignored the whispering clusters of junior officers from various species, and generally basked in his own magnificence. Then he saw her. Lieutenant Maya Torres was crouched beside an access panel in one of the main corridors, her human fingers, delicate little things, working on some routine maintenance task. She wore the standard human fleet uniform, which looked about as threatening as a decorative cushion. Her dark hair was pulled back in what humans called a ponytail, and she was humming something while recalibrating whatever needed recalibrating. Krathvor stopped, tilted his head. All 4 of his eyes focused on this specimen of supposed death world evolution. She looked up, noticed him staring, and offered a polite smile. "Morning. Sorry, just finishing up here. I will be out of the walkway in 2 minutes." Her voice was so gentle, so civilized, so completely and utterly non-threatening. Something in Krathvor's brain, the part that thrived on demonstrating superiority, lit up like a solar flare. "You are one of the humans," he announced, not asked, because Krathvor did not ask obvious questions. "Guilty as charged," Maya said, turning back to her work. "Lieutenant Maya Torres, Engineering Corps." "I am Krathvor, undefeated combat master of 7 systems," he said, because humility was for people with things to be humble about. "I have been observing your species since your arrival. You seem fragile." Maya paused, her hands stilling on the panel. She looked up again, one eyebrow raised in that curious way humans had. "Fragile. Okay. Thanks for the assessment, I guess." A small crowd was already forming. News traveled fast on Meridian Station, and Krathvor holding a conversation in a public corridor was basically an event. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Off-duty personnel materialized from nowhere. Everyone loved watching the combat master interact with newcomers, especially when those newcomers were from species no one had seen before. "I do not mean offense," Krathvor continued, which was absolutely a lie, because he definitely meant offense. "But your species lacks natural defenses. No armor, no additional limbs, no venom sacs. It is a miracle you survived long enough to develop space travel. Perhaps I could offer you some instruction. Basic defensive techniques. Consider it a charitable gesture to welcome humanity to the greater galactic community." The condescension dripped from every word like honey from a broken jar. Maya stood up slowly, closing the access panel with a soft click. She was maybe 5.5 feet tall, which meant she had to crane her neck to look up at Krethovor's face. The size difference was almost comical. She wiped her hands on her uniform, leaving small grease smears, and crossed her arms. "You want to teach me combat techniques?" she said flatly. "Indeed. Free of charge, naturally. I would hate for you to injure yourself during your stay here. The station can be dangerous for the unprepared." Someone in the growing crowd, a Vaxian merchant with more money than sense, shouted out, "I will bet 50 credits the human does not last 30 seconds. That opened the floodgates. Credits started changing hands faster than light particles through a wormhole. The odds were not in Maya's favor. In fact, the odds suggested she would be lucky to survive without serious injury even in a training scenario. Maya looked at the crowd, then back at Krethovor, then at the crowd again. Her expression was completely unreadable, which should have been Krethovor's first warning sign, but he was too busy inflating his own ego to notice. "You're right," she said finally, her tone shifting to something that almost sounded amused. "Sure, let us do this. When and where?" Krethovor's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a Zentari smile. "The main training arena. 1 hour. That should give you time to prepare yourself mentally." "Oh, I am prepared," Maya said, her smile widening just slightly. "Trust me, I am very prepared." The crowd erupted in excited chatter as Krethovor turned and strode away, already visualizing how he would gently, carefully, demonstrate the vast gap between their species' combat capabilities. He would be kind about it, naturally, instructive, a learning opportunity for everyone involved. Behind him, if he had bothered to listen carefully, he might have heard Maya speaking quietly to another human who had appeared beside her. "He has no idea, does he?" the other human asked. "Not even a little bit," Maya replied, still smiling. The hour passed exactly as Krethovor expected it to, which is to say, it passed with him receiving congratulations he had not technically earned yet, but everyone assumed were inevitable. He spent the time in his private preparation chamber, performing his ritual stretches and mentally cataloging all the ways this would go. Humans, he thought, while extending all 4 arms in sequence, were bipedal, only 2 legs. That meant inferior balance, limited mobility, predictable movement patterns. Their reaction time, according to the galactic database he had briefly skimmed, was decent for a species without compound eyes, but nothing exceptional, certainly nothing compared to Zentari reflexes, which could track and respond to threats in microseconds. He flexed his primary arms, watching the muscles ripple beneath his exoskeleton. That exoskeleton alone was a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. It could withstand plasma burns, kinetic impacts, even limited exposure to hard vacuum. Humans had skin, soft pink or brown or various shades thereof, skin. The kind that tore when you looked at it wrong. The kind that needed constant maintenance, hydration, protection from their own sun, for crying out loud. 4 arms versus 2. Exoskeleton versus skin. Enhanced reflexes versus, well, whatever humans had. This was not going to be a fight. This was going to be a demonstration, a public service announcement titled, "Why Deathworld Rumors Are Mostly Exaggeration." Krethovor selected his training equipment with care. Not his actual combat gear, oh no. That would be overkill of the highest order, possibly fatal. Instead, he chose his gentlest practice sword, the one he used for teaching absolute beginners. It was still made of reinforced durasteel because you could not practice real technique with foam nonsense, but it had rounded edges and a weighted balance that prevented lethal strikes. The blade was roughly 4 feet long, which would look absurdly oversized in the human's tiny hands, but that was her problem to solve. He strapped on light padding across his chest and joints, not because he needed it, but because it looked more official, more instructional, like he was taking this seriously as a teaching moment. The main training arena was packed when he arrived. Word had spread through the station like a virus. The circular space, easily 200 feet in diameter with cushioned floors and energy barriers along the walls, was surrounded by 3 tiers of observation platforms. Every single spot was occupied. Krathvor counted at least 12 different species in attendance. The betting pools had apparently expanded beyond simple win-loss scenarios. People were now wagering on how many seconds the human would remain conscious, whether she would cry, if she would require medical attention. It was almost sad, really. Maya was already there, standing in the center of the arena, and Krathvor had to suppress a laugh. She had changed into what appeared to be human exercise clothing: flexible pants, a fitted shirt, lightweight shoes, no armor, no padding, no protection whatsoever. She might as well have shown up naked for all the good that outfit would do her. She was stretching. Actually stretching, like this was some kind of casual gymnasium session. She bent forward, touched her toes with ease, then twisted her torso side to side. Then, and this is the part that made several audience members gasp, she lifted one leg straight up beside her head in a standing split, holding it there while rotating her ankle in circles. "Showing off your flexibility will not help against a trained opponent," Krathvor announced as he approached, his voice booming across the arena. Maya lowered her leg smoothly. "No wobble, no loss of balance. Just making sure I am loose. Do not want to pull anything, you know?" The crowd's chatter intensified. More credits changed hands. A Dravaxian in the front row was literally taking notes, probably for some research paper on human foolishness. Krathvor picked up the training sword from the equipment rack, feeling its familiar weight settle into his primary right hand. 3.5 pounds of reinforced durasteel, perfectly balanced, capable of delivering bruising impacts without breaking bones. Usually he had seen this particular blade crack chatin, dent light armor, and once, memorably leave an imprint on a Korvaxian's natural plating. "This," he said, holding it up for Maya to see, "is a standard Zentari training blade. I have selected the lightest one available for your comfort. Even so, it may feel heavy to you. Do not be ashamed if you need 2 hands to wield it properly." Maya walked over, looked at the sword with the kind of casual interest someone might give a mildly interesting stick, and held out one hand. "May I?" Krathvor placed it in her palm, fully expecting her arm to drop from the weight. It did not drop. She lifted it, gave it a few experimental swings, twirled it once in a move that was absolutely not beginner level, and nodded. "Yeah, this works. A bit light, actually, but I can manage." "Light." She called reinforced steel light. Krathvor's mandibles twitched. Clearly she was overcompensating, trying to save face in front of the crowd. Humans had pride. He had read that somewhere, excessive pride for creatures so fragile. "Your grip is wrong," he said, moving closer. "You must hold it firmly, but not rigidly. The wrist should remain flexible to absorb impact shock, otherwise you risk serious injury when our blades meet." "Got it," Maya said, adjusting her grip in a way that actually looked more correct than before. "Anything else?" The crowd was getting restless. The Vaxian merchant from earlier shouted, "Get on with it. My credits are burning a hole in my pouch." Krathvor stepped back, raising his own training blade into his preferred opening stance, sword high in his primary right hand, secondary arms spread for balance and grappling opportunities, legs bent for explosive movement. It was the stance that had won him countless victories. The stance that was about to teach this human a valuable lesson about respecting superior species. "We begin on your mark," he said generously. "Take your time, center yourself, and remember, there is no shame in yielding early." Maya settled into a stance that looked deceptively relaxed. Sword held almost casually in one hand, her weight balanced evenly on both feet. She smiled, and for just a fraction of a second, something in that smile made Krathvor's instincts whisper a warning he was far too arrogant to hear. "Ready when you are, instructor," she said. The crowd held its collective breath. This, Krathvor thought with absolute certainty, would be over in seconds. He was right about that part, just not in the way he expected. Krathvor began with what he called the flowing demonstration, a sequence of moves designed to showcase proper form while simultaneously intimidating the opponent into submission. It was theatrical, sure, but it worked, every single time. He moved through the forms with practiced grace, all 4 arms flowing in coordinated patterns that had taken him years to perfect. His primary blade carved through the air in elegant arcs, each movement precise enough to split a falling leaf. His secondary arms shifted position constantly, creating openings and closing them, demonstrating the superior tactical advantage of having twice as many limbs as your opponent. The crowd murmured appreciatively. This was why they came. This was what a real warrior looked like. Maya watched with her head tilted slightly, like someone observing a particularly elaborate dance routine at a cultural festival. Her expression was polite, attentive, maybe even genuinely interested. She even nodded at one point, which Krathvor took as acknowledgement of his obvious mastery. "You see," he said, finishing the sequence with a flourish that ended with his blade perfectly vertical, "combat is not about strength alone, it is about precision, timing, understanding the geometry of conflict. Now, show me your stance again. We will begin with the absolute basics." Maya shifted her feet slightly, adjusted her grip on the training sword. "Like this." No, your rear foot is too far back. You will have no power in your strikes." "Here, allow me." Krathvor moved closer, using his secondary left hand to tap her ankle. "Forward, about 6 inches. Yes, like that. In your grip, you are holding the blade too loosely. If I strike with even moderate force, it will fly from your hand." "Oh, that would be bad," Maya said, tightening her grip obediently. "Should I choke up on the handle? Give myself better control?" No, grip at the base. Maximum leverage. Did they teach you nothing on your world?" "Well, we have our own methods," Maya said with a small shrug. "But I am here to learn, right? So, what happens next? Do you come at me or do I come at you? Or is there like a signal?" Krathvor tried very hard not to sigh. She truly was a complete novice. This was almost unfair. Almost. "I will attack with a basic overhead strike," telegraphed so you can see it coming. "Your job is to raise your blade and intercept mine at a 45-degree angle, deflecting the force away from your body. Do you understand? Overhead strike. 45-degree block. Got it." Maya settled into her stance, looking about as threatening as a flower arrangement. "Prepare yourself," Krathvor announced loudly for the crowd's benefit. First technique, descending moon strike. He raised his primary blade high, paused for exactly 2 seconds so she could track the movement, and brought it down in a controlled arc that would have looked devastating, but carried maybe 20% of his actual power. Enough to test her block, not enough to send her to the medical bay. The blades met, and Krathvor's entire world lurched sideways. The impact jarred up his arm like he had struck a reinforced bulkhead. His blade stopped cold, completely halted by her casual interception, and the shock of it traveled through his shoulder joint and into his carapace. His secondary arms windmilled briefly as he caught his balance, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Maya stood exactly where she had been, blade still angled at 45 degrees, not even swaying from the impact. She looked up at him with those unsettling human eyes, brown and entirely too calm. "Was that right?" she asked. "It felt right, but I am new at this." "So?" Krathvor stared at her, then at his blade, then at her blade, then back at her. "That was acceptable," he managed, his voice only slightly strained. "Your form was adequate. However, you got lucky with the angle. Let us try again, with slightly more realistic force. In actual combat, opponents will not be so gentle." "Makes sense," Maya agreed, resetting her stance. "Hit me harder this time. I can take it." "Hit her harder." "Fine." Krathvor adjusted his grip, rolled his shoulders, and decided to use about 40% power this time. Enough to really test her, enough to show her what a real strike felt like, but still well within training safety parameters. He attacked from a different angle, a sweeping horizontal cut aimed at her midsection. Faster this time. More force behind it, the blade singing through the air with that distinctive whine of accelerated durasteel. Maya's block came up smooth as silk, intercepting his blade at the perfect angle. The impact was worse this time. Much worse. Krathvor actually stumbled, his primary arm going numb from the collision. It felt like he had struck a starship hull. The training sword vibrated in his grip, the frequency rattling his teeth. His secondary arms shot out instinctively to maintain balance, and he had to take 2 full steps backward to recover his stance. Maya remained absolutely stationary, not braced, not straining, just standing there, blade in hand, like she had stopped a mild breeze instead of a strike that could dent light plating. "Better?" she asked brightly. "I think I am getting the hang of this blocking thing." The crowd had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that happens when everyone watching simultaneously realizes something is very, very wrong with their assumptions about reality. Krathvor flexed his primary hand, trying to get feeling back into his fingers. This did not make sense. Her size, her mass, her complete lack of leverage, all of it said she should have been knocked backward, disarmed, possibly sent sprawling. Instead, she stood there looking like someone who had just caught a thrown ball. "You are stronger than you appear," he said carefully, his mind racing through possibilities. Hidden augmentations, gravity manipulation tech, some kind of personal shielding. "I mean, I work out," Maya said with a shrug. "Standard fitness regimen, nothing crazy." Standard. She called this standard. Krathvor's pride, that massive inflated thing that had carried him through 15 cycles of victories, made a decision. A stupid decision. A decision that ignored every warning sign his instincts were currently screaming. She got lucky. Twice. Statistically unlikely, but possible. What she could not do was maintain that luck against a properly executed combination attack with real force behind it. "I believe," he said slowly, "we should move beyond basic blocks. Let us test your reactions with a proper sequence. This will be considerably more challenging. Are you certain you wish to continue?" Maya's smile widened just a fraction. "Oh, absolutely. I am learning so much. Please, show me what you have got." Krathvor settled into his combat stance, the real one this time, and began channeling actual effort into his limbs. 60% power. A 3-strike combination. High, low, middle. Fast enough to challenge experienced fighters, overwhelming enough to break through beginner defenses. The crowd leaned forward collectively. This was about to get interesting. And by interesting, I mean catastrophic, but Krathvor did not know that yet. He raised his blade, all 4 arms coordinating into perfect attacking position, and launched himself forward with the full confidence of someone who had absolutely no idea what he was dealing with. The sound of reinforced durasteel meeting a movable object was about to become very, very familiar to everyone in that arena. The 3-strike combination was Krathvor's signature move, the one that had ended more fights than he could count. High slash to force the guard up, low sweep to exploit the opening, then a devastating middle thrust while the opponent was still recovering. It flowed like water, like poetry, like inevitable victory. He executed it flawlessly. Maya blocked all 3 strikes without moving her feet. Not stepped back, not sidestepped, not even shifted her weight. She just moved her blade with minimal effort, almost lazy precision, intercepting each of his attacks at exactly the right angle to deflect them harmlessly away. Her expression remained pleasant, politely interested, like she was attending a lecture on moderately engaging tax policy. Krathvor backed off, breathing harder than he wanted to admit. His arms ached. All 4 of them. The vibrations from the impacts were still rattling through his exoskeleton, and he was starting to develop a very uncomfortable suspicion that something was fundamentally wrong with his understanding of human physiology. "That was a nice combo," Maya said conversationally. "Very technical. I appreciate the footwork, really smooth transitions." She was critiquing his technique. This barely trained human was offering feedback on his form like she had any right to an opinion. The condescension that had been flowing from Krathvor all day suddenly reversed direction, and he felt it hit him like a tidal wave of humiliation. The crowd was muttering now, confused conversations rippling through the observation tiers. The betting pools were in chaos. Several people were demanding their credits back. Someone in the upper section kept repeating, "That is not possible, that is not possible," like a broken audio file. Krathvor's pride. That enormous fragile thing cracked just slightly. And like all fragile things when they crack, it became dangerous. "You are toying with me," he said, his voice dropping to something sharp and cold. Maya's pleasant expression flickered, just for a moment. "I am doing exactly what you asked, blocking your strikes. Learning proper defensive technique." "No, you are making a fool of me." "Actually," Maya said, and now her tone shifted too, the politeness draining away to reveal something harder underneath. "You are making a fool of yourself. I have been standing here for 10 minutes listening to you explain basic physics to me like I am a child, watching you show off your fancy forms, absorbing your condescending little comments about my fragile species. I blocked your hits. I did not complain. I played along with your whole teaching charade." She planted the tip of her training sword against the padded floor, leaning on it slightly. Her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made his exoskeleton feel suddenly very thin. But here is the thing, she continued, her voice carrying across the now completely silent arena. I have been holding back. A lot. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, you would realize halfway through this circus that you bit off more than you could chew and we could end this gracefully. But no, you keep pushing, keep assuming, keep insulting my species while pretending to be generous. Krithor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a Zentari stress response he could not quite control. I insulted nothing. I offered instruction. You offered ego, Maya corrected. And honestly, my patience for it just ran out. She straightened, lifted her training sword back into a ready position, and something in her posture changed. The casual, relaxed student vanished, replaced by something that made Krathvor's 4 eyes widen involuntarily. Her stance was suddenly perfect, militarily precise, the stance of someone who had spent years training for real combat, not arena demonstrations. So here is what is going to happen, Maya said quietly. You are going to give me your absolute best shot, no holding back, no teaching, no pulling your strikes. I want you to hit me with everything you have got, and then we are going to be done with this. The arena could have heard a dust particle land. Every being present held their breath, the tension so thick you could have bottled it and sold it as industrial adhesive. Krathvor should have walked away, should have claimed victory through her obvious skill revelation, should have done literally anything other than what his wounded pride demanded. Instead he roared, a sound that echoed off the arena walls like thunder, and attacked with 100% of his power. All 4 arms coordinated into a single devastating overhead strike, both primary hands gripping his training sword, both secondary arms bracing the movement for maximum force transfer. Every muscle in his body engaged. Every enhancement his species possessed activated. This was the strike that had shattered reinforced barriers, the strike that ended championship bouts, the strike that made his reputation across 7 systems. The blade came down like a meteor, fast enough to blur, heavy enough to crack stone. Maya caught it, mid-swing, with one hand. Her fingers simply closed around the durasteel blade about 6 inches from the tip, and the weapon stopped like it had hit a temporal stasis field. Krathvor's momentum carried his body forward, but the sword went absolutely nowhere. The shock of the sudden stop traveled up all 4 of his arms, and he heard something in his secondary shoulder make a popping sound that promised pain later. What? He breathed, unable to form a complete sentence. Maya looked at the blade in her hand, then at Krathvor, then back at the blade. Her expression was calm, matter of fact, maybe even a little tired. You know, she said conversationally, these training swords are supposed to be durable. Reinforced durasteel, right? Tested to withstand how much force exactly? She squeezed. The sound that followed would haunt Krathavor's nightmares for the rest of his life. Metal grinding against metal, a shriek of compressed durasteel, the groan of molecular bonds being forced past their structural limits. The blade bent in her grip, actually curved like it was made of soft clay instead of military-grade alloy. Maya shifted her other hand to the sword, adjusted her grip with the casual air of someone folding laundry, and proceeded to fold the reinforced durasteel training blade in half. Not break it, not snap it, fold it. Like a metal ribbon. The blade creased perfectly at the midpoint, the 2 halves coming together with a final screech of tortured metal that made several audience members physically flinch. She held it up for everyone to see. This impossible thing, this 4-foot durasteel sword now compressed into a neat 2-foot U-shape. She said, examining her work. I might have overdone that slightly. The silence that crashed down on the arena was the kind of silence that accompanies paradigm shifts, the kind that happens when an entire crowd's understanding of reality fundamentally breaks and has to rebuild itself from scratch. Krathvor stood frozen, all 4 arms still extended in his follow-through position, staring at the folded sword like it was a religious artifact from a particularly confusing deity. His brain had stopped processing information approximately when Maya's fingers had closed around the blade. Everything after that was just sensory input his mind refused to acknowledge as real. Someone in the crowd dropped their datapad. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. Maya tossed the folded sword to the arena floor, where it landed with a heavy thunk that seemed to punctuate the end of Krathvor's entire worldview. She dusted her hands off, a gesture that was completely unnecessary but somehow made the whole thing worse. So, she said, looking up at the still frozen combat instructor with an expression that was equal parts sympathy and exasperation. Do you want to talk about Earth's gravity now, or should we let that be a surprise for the next person who decides to offer me condescending combat lessons? Krathvor's mandibles moved, trying to form words, trying to construct a sentence that made sense in this new reality where humans could fold reinforced durasteel with their bare hands. Nothing came out but a faint clicking sound. Maya sighed, picked up the folded training sword and held it out to him like a very strange peace offering. "Keep it," she said. "Souvenir." And that finally was when Krathvor's legs remembered they had the option to stop supporting his weight. He sat down heavily on the arena floor, still staring, still unable to process, while the crowd erupted into the loudest, most chaotic reaction Meridian Station had witnessed in its entire operational history. Krathvor sat on the arena floor for what felt like several geological ages but was probably only 30 seconds, holding a folded durasteel training sword in his primary hands while his brain attempted to reboot its entire operating system. Around him, the arena had descended into absolute pandemonium. The crowd was no longer a crowd, it was a mob of confused, shouting, gesticulating beings, all trying to process what they had just witnessed. The betting pools had collapsed entirely, credits were being thrown at bookies who were refusing to pay out because clearly something illegal had happened. Some kind of trick, maybe hidden technology, possibly a glitch in the station's artificial gravity. Maya stood a few feet away, arms crossed, waiting with the patience of someone who had been through this exact scenario before and knew it would take a while for everyone to catch up. A voice cut through the chaos, human accented and deeply amused. "Maya, did you really have to fold the sword? I thought we talked about this." Another human pushed through the crowd. A tall man with graying hair and commander's insignia on his uniform. He was trying very hard not to laugh and failing spectacularly. Behind him came 3 more humans, all wearing the same expression of mixed exasperation and entertainment. "In my defense, Commander Reeves," Maya said, not sounding defensive at all. "He asked for my best effort. I gave him 70%, tops." 70%, Krathvor heard himself whisper. The number bounced around his skull like a trapped photon. Commander Reeves walked over and offered Krathvor a hand up. "Come on, let us get you vertical. Trust me, the existential crisis is easier to handle when you are standing." Krathvor took the offered hand automatically and felt another small piece of his worldview crumble when the human commander lifted him to his feet with the same ease someone might lift a small package. He weighed nearly 400 pounds. The commander had not even braced himself. "What are you people?" Krathvor managed, his voice somewhere between awe and horror. "Humans," Maya said simply. "From Earth. You know, that death world everyone keeps mentioning in the rumor mills." One of the other humans, a shorter woman with bright red hair, laughed outright. "Oh, he thought those were exaggerated, did not he? They always think that. Something about our appearance does not compute with our capabilities." "It is the skin," another human added, this one a young man barely into adulthood. "No exoskeleton equals weak, in their minds. Never mind that our musculature evolved to fight gravity that would pancake most of them." Krathvor's eyes widened. "Your gravity. How much?" "Earth standard is about 9.8 meters per second squared," Commander Reeves said casually, like he was discussing the weather. "Most stations, including this one, run at about 1.2 for galactic standard, which is roughly 40% of what we are used to. Makes us feel a bit floaty, honestly." A Peltharian in the front row pulled out a data pad, fingers flying across the interface. Wait, let me check the database. Surely this is recorded somewhere. Human homeworld specifications. There has to be. Oh no. Found it?" Maya asked cheerfully. It says your species evolved under gravitational pressure 3 times galactic standard. And your atmospheric density is, how are you even breathing our air? This is not enough oxygen for your biology. Are you all just constantly oxygen deprived up here? We adjust, Maya shrugged. It is fine, little lightheaded sometimes, but you get used to it. Krathvor was doing math in his head. Terrible math. Math that kept producing answers he did not want to believe. 3 times standard gravity. Every day, every movement, every action. These beings were constantly operating under forces that would cripple most species, and they called it normal. "Your training regimen," he said to Maya, his voice hollow. You mentioned a standard fitness routine. Oh yeah, I do my workouts in the human section of the station, where we have adjustable gravity chambers. I usually set mine to 3 Gs, sometimes 3.5 when I am feeling ambitious. Keeps the muscle mass from deteriorating too much in this low-grav environment. 3.5 times what he lived in. She exercised in 3.5 times what he lived in. For fun, to stay in shape. Krathvor looked down at the folded sword in his hands. Reinforced durasteel rated for impacts up to 12,000 newtons of force, bent like decorative foil by a human who had been casually holding back while he pranced around demonstrating his superiority. I am going to die of embarrassment, he said flatly. Nah, Maya said kindly. You will survive. Your ego, though, that might need medical attention. The human section of the crowd was laughing now, not cruel laughter, but the kind of laughter that comes from watching someone learn a very expensive lesson. Commander Reeves patted Krathvor on the shoulder, a gesture that felt disturbingly patronizing given the context. Look at the bright side, the commander said. This story is going to be legendary. You are going to be famous. I was already famous, Krathvor muttered. Different kind of famous now, buddy. And he was right, of course. Within 6 hours, footage of the match had spread to every corner of Meridian Station. Within 12 hours, it had reached 3 neighboring systems. Within a day, the folded sword incident was being discussed in diplomatic channels, military academies, and sports bars across known space. The actual folded sword ended up in a display case in the station's main concourse, with a plaque that read, Reinforced Durasteel Training Blade, folded by Lieutenant Maya Torres, human, as a demonstration of why you should read the species database before issuing challenges. Krathvor visited it sometimes, late at night when fewer people were around, just to remind himself that humility was not actually the worst thing in the galaxy. 2 weeks after the incident, Maya found him in his training facility, which had notably fewer students than before and considerably more humans asking about cross-species combat techniques. Hey, she said, leaning against the doorframe. I have been thinking. You are actually a pretty good instructor, technique-wise. Your forms are solid. Your understanding of combat geometry is excellent. You just had some, let us call them knowledge gaps, about human capabilities. Krathvor looked up from the new training equipment he had been organizing, equipment with significantly higher durability ratings. Is this the part where you gloat? This is the part where I offer to actually teach you some things, Maya said. Earth-style combat techniques adapted for lower gravity environments could be useful for your repertoire. Plus, you know, it might help you understand what you are working with when the next human shows up wanting to train. He considered this, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. You would teach me, after I was so condescending, arrogant, dismissive of my entire species' evolutionary advantages. Yes, all of those things. Maya grinned. Hey, everyone gets one massive humiliation as a learning experience. You used yours up, now you get to actually learn something useful. What do you say? Krathvor looked at the folded sword display visible through his facility's window, then back at Maya, then at his forearms, which suddenly seemed like a much less overwhelming advantage than they had 2 weeks ago. I would be honored, he said, and meant it. Great. Meet me in Gravity Chamber 5 tomorrow, 0800. We will start at 1.5 Gs and work up from there. Work up to what? Maya's smile turned slightly evil. Let us find out what you are really capable of when you have to work for it, instructor. She left, and Krathvor sat down slowly, realizing with a mixture of dread and excitement that he was about to discover just how much harder combat became when you could not rely on genetic advantages alone. Somewhere in the station, someone placed a new bet on how long the legendary Krathvor would last in a human training program. The smart money was on 3 days before he begged for mercy. The smart money, as it turned out, was wildly optimistic. But that is another story entirely.